Far beyond the busy trade routes of the galaxy, there was a quiet region of space that every star map marked with the same warning. Terran space, entry forbidden. Most civilizations did not ask why. They simply stayed away. Cargo captains changed their routes. Exploration ships turned around. Even powerful military fleets avoided that invisible border. Because everyone in the galaxy knew the same story. The territory belonged to humans. Humans were strange compared to other species in the galaxy. They were not the oldest civilization, and they were not the largest empire. But they were something far more dangerous. They were patient. For hundreds of years, humanity had quietly built its territory. They traded with other civilizations. They helped weaker systems. They rarely showed aggression. But every map carried the same simple warning. Do not enter Terran space without permission. Most empires respected the message. All except one. The Scythian Empire ruled thousands of star systems. Their fleets were legendary across the galaxy. Their warships were massive, their armies endless, and their emperor believed one simple truth. Strength decided everything. And in his mind, humanity was weak. The emperor had studied the Terrans for years. He saw peaceful traders and quiet colonies. He saw diplomacy instead of conquest. To him, it looked like fear. So one day, inside the Golden War chamber of the Imperial Palace, he gave an order that would soon echo across the galaxy. Prepare the invasion fleet. The Empire's greatest military force began to gather. Hundreds of warships moved from distant systems. Giant battlecruisers formed long lines in space. Dreadnoughts the size of cities powered their massive engines. When the fleet finally assembled, it looked like a moving wall of metal and weapons. Admiral Karthos, commander of the invasion fleet, stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the holographic map in front of him. A glowing red line marked the border of Terran space. Many officers in the fleet had heard the old warnings. Some of them felt uneasy. But the admiral only smiled. Just another empty threat, he said calmly. Across the fleet, engines ignited. Thousands of ships began moving toward the forbidden border. Far away, a small Terran listening station detected the movement. Inside the station, human operators watched the approaching fleet on their screens. One officer quietly reported the numbers. Multiple Imperial battle groups, hundreds of warships. The room remained calm. No one panicked. No one shouted. Instead, the commander of the station slowly stood up and looked at the red line on the star map. The Imperial fleet was only minutes away. Send the standard message, he ordered. Moments later, the entire Imperial fleet received a single transmission. The message was simple. Cold. Clear. You are approaching restricted Terran territory. Turn back immediately. Admiral Karthos listened to the message and laughed. Send them a reply, he said. The Imperial communications officer nodded and transmitted the response. This territory now belongs to the Scythian Empire. The fleet did not slow down. Within minutes, the first Imperial ships crossed the red line on the map. They had entered Terran space. For a moment, nothing happened. No defense ships appeared. No weapons fired. The stars remained quiet. Across the Imperial fleet, officers began to relax. Some even celebrated early. The Terran warning had been empty after all. Admiral Karthos leaned back in his command chair. Scan the surrounding systems, he ordered. Let's see where the humans are hiding. Sensors began searching the nearby space. But what they found confused the entire fleet. There were no human warships. No fleets. No visible defenses. Only empty space. It looked as if humanity had abandoned the region completely. The admiral smiled again. Pathetic, he muttered. But deep inside the fleet's sensor data, something strange was happening. Small signals flickered in the darkness. Objects moved silently beyond the range of normal scans. Watching. Waiting. Back in the Terran listening station, the commander received a new report. The Imperial fleet has crossed the border. The commander nodded slowly. He pressed a single button on his console. Across thousands of hidden locations in Terran space, ancient systems suddenly activated. Deep space stations powered up. Hidden shipyards opened their armored gates. Massive defense platforms began to wake from decades of silence. And somewhere far beyond the stars, enormous human fleets received a quiet message. The message was only 3 words long. Border violation confirmed. Back on the Imperial flagship, Admiral Karthos had no idea what he had just started. Because the galaxy believed humans were peaceful. But there was something the Emperor never understood. Humans were peaceful until someone crossed the line. And now the line had been crossed. The Imperial fleet moved deeper into Terran space like a storm of metal. Hundreds of warships filled the darkness between the stars. Engines burned bright blue across the silent void. From a distance, the fleet looked unstoppable. Inside the command bridge of the flagship Dominion Spear, Admiral Karthos watched the holographic star map slowly change. The red borderline of Terran space was now far behind them. And still, nothing had happened. No human fleet appeared. No weapons fired. Only quiet space and distant stars. The Admiral crossed his arms and smiled. "Where are the humans now?" he asked his officers. No one answered. Because everyone on the bridge had expected something by now. A defense fleet. A warning shot. Something. But the humans had done nothing. Across the fleet, confidence began to grow. Imperial captains started sending reports of empty colonies and silent stations. Some Terran mining platforms drifted quietly near asteroids, but they showed no signs of activity. It looked as if humanity had simply abandoned the region. Perhaps the stories about humans were exaggerated, one officer said. Another laughed. Looks like they ran away. The Admiral nodded slowly. Yes, that seems likely. He opened a communication channel across the fleet. All ships continue forward. Begin scanning nearby systems. Terran territory will soon belong to the Empire. The message spread quickly through the massive armada. Celebrations began on some ships. Officers congratulated each other. Many believed they had just conquered a powerful civilization without firing a single shot. But not everyone felt comfortable. On one destroyer near the edge of the fleet, a young sensor officer frowned at his console. Something strange kept appearing on his scanners. Tiny signals. Short bursts of movement. Ships, maybe. But every time he tried to lock onto them, they disappeared. He ran the scan again. The signal returned for half a second. Then vanished. "Commander," he said nervously. "I'm detecting unknown objects outside the fleet." The destroyer commander walked over and studied the data. "Probably debris," he said. "No sir, they're moving." The commander watched the sensor screen carefully. Then suddenly the signal appeared again. A small object, moving silently in the dark. Then another. Then another. But before the sensors could identify them, they vanished once more. The commander felt a chill. "Report this to Fleet Command." Minutes later, the report reached Admiral Karthos. The Admiral barely looked at it. "Ghost signals," he said dismissively. "Probably faulty sensors." But the reports kept coming. Different ships across the fleet detected the same strange signals. Something was moving beyond their scanners. Watching them. Following them. Still, the Admiral refused to slow down. "Humans are hiding," he told his officers. "They know they cannot stop us." Hours passed as the fleet continued deeper into Terran space. Then suddenly, without warning, The fleet's navigation systems shut down. Every screen on the flagship flickered. Warning alarms echoed across the bridge. "Admiral," a technician shouted. "Navigation offline." Another officer looked up from his console. "Communications are failing across the fleet." Weapon systems began to lock. Engines dropped to idle power. Within seconds, hundreds of Imperial warships drifted helplessly through space. Admiral Carthos stood up sharply. "What is happening?" The crew tried to restart their systems, but nothing responded. Every control panel showed the same message. "Access denied." The Admiral stared at the words. Then suddenly, the main communication screen activated. A single transmission had forced its way into every ship in the fleet. The image was simple. No face. No symbol. Just a calm human voice. Cold. Controlled. And very clear. "Zytherian Imperial Fleet," the voice said. "You have violated Terran territorial law." The bridge became silent. No one moved. The voice continued. "You were warned." Admiral Carthos stepped forward. "Identify yourself," he demanded. For a moment, there was no answer. Then the voice spoke again. "We are humanity." The message paused. And the final words felt heavier than any weapon. "You crossed the line." Across the Imperial fleet, long-range sensors suddenly began detecting something new. Not hundreds. Not thousands. But tens of thousands of signals. Ships. Human ships. Appearing from the darkness of space. All around them. For a moment, the bridge of the Dominion sphere was completely silent. No one spoke. No one even breathed loudly. Every officer on the command deck stared at the sensor screens in disbelief. Moments ago, Terran space had looked empty. Now the scanners were filled with signals. Thousands of them. Red lights began to appear across the holographic map surrounding the Imperial fleet. One officer whispered, almost unable to believe what he was seeing. "Admiral, new contacts detected." Another voice followed quickly. More signals appearing. Then another. And more. The lights kept multiplying across the map. They were everywhere. Behind the fleet. Above it. Below it. And slowly closing in from every direction. Admiral Carthos stepped closer to the tactical display. "Identify the ships," he ordered. The sensor officer shook his head. "We can't, sir. They're using some kind of advanced stealth systems. We're only detecting their engine signatures." Another officer spoke. "Range estimates show they're extremely large vessels." "How large?" the Admiral demanded. The officer hesitated before answering. "Larger than our dreadnoughts." A quiet wave of unease spread across the bridge. Outside the flagship, the Imperial fleet still drifted in space, their systems partially locked by whatever had disabled them. Then suddenly, one of the sensors finally managed to focus on a single signal. The display zoomed in. And for the first time, the Imperial officers saw one of the human warships clearly. It was enormous. A dark metallic giant emerging slowly from the shadows of space. Its hull was covered in massive weapon arrays and thick armor plates that reflected distant starlight. The ship moved silently, like a predator in the dark. Behind it, more shapes began to appear. Huge cruisers. Heavy carriers. Endless rows of warships sliding out from asteroid fields, hidden stations, and deep space. It was not just a fleet. It was an entire armada. Across the Imperial fleet, panic began to spread. Human ships detected on all sides. "They're surrounding us. Power systems are still restricted." Admiral Carthos slammed his fist onto the console. "Restore our systems now." Technicians rushed to override the locks controlling the fleet's weapons and engines. Slowly, systems began returning. Weapons powered up. Engines restarted. Communications stabilized. But by the time control returned, the humans were already there. Thousands of warships now surrounded the Imperial fleet like a closing storm. The largest Terran vessel moved forward slowly, positioning itself directly in front of the Imperial flagship. Its size was overwhelming. The human ship was nearly 3 times larger than the Dominion Spear. And it was not alone. Entire battle groups of Terran ships drifted silently around the Imperial fleet. Weapons ready. But not firing. Admiral Karthos stared at the massive warship on the screen. For the first time since the invasion began, he felt uncertainty. Then the communication screen activated again. The same calm human voice returned. "You were given a warning." Admiral Karthos stepped forward. "You cannot threaten the Scytherian Empire," he said firmly. "Withdraw your forces or face destruction." For several seconds, there was no reply. Then the human voice spoke again. Still calm. Still controlled. "This is not a threat." A pause followed. Then the final sentence came. "This is the response." Across Terran space, massive defense platforms began to activate. Hidden stations unfolded from asteroid belts. Ancient orbital cannons powered up near distant stars. Long-range targeting systems locked onto every Imperial warship. Thousands of human vessels aligned their weapons. Inside the Imperial fleet, alarms began to scream. Multiple targeting locks detected. Enemy weapons charging. Energy spikes across the entire region. Admiral Karthos looked around the bridge. For the first time, he realized something terrifying. The humans had not gathered this fleet in response to the invasion. The fleet had already been here. Hidden. Waiting. Prepared. Terran space had never been empty. It had been watching. The human voice returned one last time. "You entered forbidden territory." Every Terran warship powered its weapons. Bright lights began to glow along the sides of their massive hulls. Energy built across thousands of cannons. And then the voice spoke the final words. "You were warned." The moment the final words echoed across the Imperial fleet, space itself seemed to hold its breath. Then the darkness exploded with light. Thousands of Terran weapons fired at the same time. Brilliant blue beams, white-hot plasma lances, and silent streams of kinetic rounds crossed the void like storms of lightning. The sky around the Imperial fleet turned into a burning web of energy. The first Imperial destroyer disappeared in seconds. One moment it was there, engines glowing, weapons ready. The next moment it was gone, its hull shattered by a Terran rail cannon that punched straight through the ship and into the emptiness beyond. Across the battlefield, explosions lit the stars. Imperial cruisers tried to maneuver, but human ships were already moving faster. Terran vessels moved with terrifying coordination. Every attack looked planned long before the invasion had even begun. Human warships did not waste fire. They struck command ships first. Within the first 5 minutes, 3 Imperial command carriers exploded into clouds of glowing debris. Inside the Dominion Spear, Admiral Karthos gripped the command console as alarms screamed across the bridge. "Return fire," he shouted. Imperial dreadnoughts opened their heavy cannons. Massive energy blasts fired toward the nearest human battleship. For a moment, it looked like the Terran ship would be destroyed. But suddenly a shimmering shield appeared around the vessel. The Imperial blast struck the barrier and split apart like water hitting stone. The Terran battleship didn't even slow down. Instead, its main cannon slowly rotated toward the Imperial line. The weapon fired. A single beam of white light cut across space and sliced through 2 Imperial cruisers at once. Both ships split apart before exploding into bright clouds of fire. Panic began spreading across the Imperial fleet. Enemy weapons are too powerful. Shields failing. We're losing ships across all sectors. The admiral stared at the tactical display. Red warning lights covered the entire map. The Imperial fleet was being destroyed faster than anyone thought possible. And the humans were barely speaking. Across the Terran armada, human commanders worked quietly. Orders were short. Precise. Cold. Target Dreadnought Group 7. Disable Carrier Wing 3. Prevent escape vectors. Human ships moved like hunters surrounding trapped prey. Fighter squadrons launched from Terran carriers, swarming through the battlefield like clouds of metal birds. Their speed was impossible to track. Imperial ships tried to escape the encirclement. But every path out of the battle was already blocked. Hidden Terran defense stations activated around nearby stars. Orbital cannons fired from distances the Empire had never believed possible. Every escape route collapsed under human firepower. 20 minutes into the battle, half the Imperial fleet was gone. 30 minutes in, their outer battle groups had been completely destroyed. Admiral Karthos watched the destruction unfold around him. Ships that had fought wars across the galaxy were disappearing in seconds. The Scytherian Empire had always believed their navy was unstoppable. But against humanity, they were helpless. "Admiral," a frightened officer said quietly, "we cannot win this battle." Another officer spoke. "Request permission to retreat." The admiral looked around the bridge. For the first time since the invasion began, the pride in his voice was gone. "Signal full retreat," he ordered. The command was transmitted across the remaining ships. Imperial vessels turned their engines toward the border of Terran space. They tried to escape. But the humans had already planned for that. Terran ships shifted positions instantly. The closing net of warships tightened around the fleet. One by one, retreating ships were intercepted and destroyed. The battle continued. 40 minutes. 50 minutes. By the end of the first hour, there were almost no Imperial ships left. The massive invasion fleet that had once filled the stars was now only drifting wreckage. Broken hulls. Fading engine lights. And silent debris floating through the dark. Inside the Dominion Spear, the bridge was filled with smoke and flickering lights. The flagship had been heavily damaged. Weapons offline. Shields gone. The admiral stood silently, staring at the battlefield outside. Where once there had been hundreds of Imperial warships, now there was nothing. Only the Terran armada remained. Waiting. Watching. And the admiral finally understood the truth that the galaxy had known for centuries. Humanity had never been weak. Humanity had simply been patient. And when their warning was ignored, they ended the war before it could truly begin. The battlefield slowly fell silent. Where the powerful Scytherian invasion fleet had once filled the stars, only wreckage remained. Broken hulls drifted slowly through space. Pieces of destroyed warships floated like dark shadows against the light of distant stars. Fires still burned on scattered fragments of metal. But the battle itself was over. The Terran fleet moved calmly through the debris field. Massive human warships drifted between the ruins of the Imperial Armada, scanning the battlefield and securing the area. There was no celebration. No victory speeches. Human commanders simply continued their work with quiet precision. Inside the damaged flagship Dominion Spear, Admiral Karthos stood in silence on the darkened bridge. His once mighty fleet had been erased in less than an hour. Ships that had taken centuries to build were now nothing but drifting debris. The admiral finally understood what the emperor had never believed. The warnings about humanity had never been empty threats. They had been promises. Suddenly the communication screen on the bridge activated again. The same calm human voice filled the silent room. "Scytherian flagship, your fleet has been neutralized." The admiral looked up slowly. "You could destroy us now," he said quietly. The voice answered without anger. Yes. For a moment, the only sound in the bridge was the quiet hum of damaged systems. Then the voice continued. But humanity does not destroy enemies who can carry a message. The admiral listened carefully. You will return to your empire, the voice said. You will tell them what happened here. Outside the broken flagship, the Terran fleet slowly moved aside, opening a narrow path through their ships. A path leading out of Terran space. The admiral understood. Humanity was allowing them to leave. Not as survivors, but as witnesses. The admiral gave a quiet order. Set course for the border. The damaged flagship slowly turned and began moving toward the escape corridor between the Terran warships. As it passed through the human fleet, the admiral saw the true scale of Terran power. Endless rows of massive battleships. Carriers larger than cities. Defense platforms glowing with weapons strong enough to destroy entire fleets. Humanity had not revealed its strength to the galaxy. Until now. Hours later, the damaged flagship finally crossed the border out of Terran space. The moment it left the region, a powerful transmission spread across every major communication network in the galaxy. Trade stations. Civilian worlds. Military command centers. Every civilization received the same message. A simple signal. A familiar warning that had existed on star maps for centuries. But now the galaxy understood its meaning. The message displayed the image of the Terran border. And beneath it, the same words appeared. Terran space, entry forbidden. Then one final sentence followed. A calm voice echoed across the stars. You were warned. Across the galaxy, leaders and admirals watched the message in silence. News of the battle spread quickly. The most powerful empire in the galaxy had sent its greatest fleet into Terran space. And that fleet had disappeared in a single hour. No one questioned the warning again. Trade routes were changed. Exploration ships updated their navigation systems. Military fleets adjusted their patrol zones. No empire wanted to repeat the same mistake. Because the galaxy had finally learned the truth about humanity. Humans were peaceful. Humans were patient. But if someone ignored their warning, humanity did not fight long wars. Humanity ended them. And from that day forward, the invisible border around Terran space became the most respected boundary in the entire galaxy.